Good morning. It's Norma Cowie here. It's Wednesday morning, and I'm here to talk about. I'm not sure actually how to topic this. I had quite a thought about it. I recently had two longtime clients in different days. One of them I've already completed, one I'm going to be completed, phoning me about feelings that they had regarding some things that came up within their families. This is not unheard of. But it was interesting that at the same time, for people that don't live close to me, but being long term years, in fact, clients. And I thought it was time perhaps to speak about how we are affected through time and space based on decisions made, circumstances that went on when we were young. I have a sheet, here, a paper that over the years I have expanded to include things that I run so I can use my trusty pendulum, which I have sitting here. Nice. I have I have lots of pendulums, but this one I like working with the best. And what I do is find out what do we want? Where do we want to go? What are we wanting to do? And then find out where the blocks are. And the blocks can be psychological, they can be physical. Not that I deal too much in that, but there are certain aspects that come on up. I call it a soul correction sheet because we're correcting to get the soul comfortable within the body and within life so we can deal and handle the majority of life and that what goes on. Sometimes when we're raised in a family, there are situations that go on that the soul inside the child that's growing gets hurt. And often in that moment of hurt, they make decisions about themselves. And those decisions have long range effects into life and into relationships, into creating, into being. One of the elements that I sort of highlighted some things I wanted to talk about, because what was interesting in the session was the word genetic came up. Now, I have a category for genetics. It very rarely shows up in the sense of, in other words, what is our genetic makeup? Where do we come from? What happens? What was interesting also in the person that I worked with the other day, when I was following the genetic line, it went back into the 1700s. In other words, in a family situation in the 1700s, some people made a tremendous decision that here we are, way back in what are we in 2025 now, has an effect. And it's sometimes hard to get a handle on that. But into relationships, and when we're born into the same families, it doesn't mean we've been together before, especially large families, or it doesn't even mean to be that large. It can just be two kids. But how do we respond to the decisions made? Usually, we go through a period of time where we're corrected a lot, or some people are more critical than others, depending on how we handle all that. But we are born with certain DNA. We know that. We all have a DNA sequence. We all know from science many things that goes on, but there's also these other little things. We might be born a male or a female, but we actually have a lot of that energy interspersed. That we also have a matriarch and a patriarch within us. So, which do we reflect to? We have a masculine and a feminine. So there's lots of combinations that we can have. So why is it that as adults, we can have another member of our family say something to us and we have an emotional reaction? Now, this is not like teenagers or 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds. This is people that are well into their lifetime, creating their lives, very successful with what they do, comfortable with whatever. And all of a sudden, one of their relatives says something, or they hear something about a relative, and all of a sudden they're throwing back. I had something similar happen to me, which is why I was really intrigued with this, because when I was having some what do you call it? Radiation treatments, I had an emotional reaction. When I was having some teeth recently pulled out, and the fillings, no, not the fillings, the freezing didn't take properly, I had a reaction. And for me, it was very eye-opening, because I actually mentioned what age I felt. And later on, because I know how to do this work, I realized that a situation had happened. And I think I've talked about this in another session. When I was 6 years old. So here I am in my 80s, all of a sudden having a reaction based on feeling 6 and reacting like I was 6. How does that happen? It's because we have a situation that's never been resolved within. And every time a similar situation comes up, we will react the same way. Family relationships, that happens often. You'll say, every time my sister says this, or every time my brother says that, I feel this way or that way. And these are the situations that govern us often and take away our happiness, our ease, our being able to deal and cope with certain situations, all of those kinds of things. And it can be passed down generation. That's why the genetics element in here is very, very important. I don't see it come up often. I really don't. In all the work I've done hundreds of these over the years. It's not something that comes up, but I did have to put it in one time, like way back, to ensure when we're looking at the male-female system, it is a term in there, genetics. And it was so fascinating for me the other day to follow the genetic line as to where did this all start? 1700s. So it's been a trait through the family, all those generations. Doesn't mean that every generation is going to see it, but it's there. The thought form, the belief, the attitude, the movement of it. So one of the things to consider is we're much more than what we think we are. This is who I am. And I know when I realized what was happening with being left alone with pain, I was acting like a 6-year-old when I had broken my arm, taken to the hospital. And I was 6. Always thought I was 7, but it turns out I was 6. And then left in a hospital room by myself with pain. And then I realized that every time I'd had pain and left by myself, I'd had this emotional reaction. I had not equated it until I had to look at it. Why did I feel like I was 6, number one? And why was I reacting? So when the clients come in and they have something they want straightened out, then I take a look and say, well, where are these coming from? What often happens, we got to take into consideration our other lives. When else were we in a lifetime with that person? Now, the sex might be different, and you might be a female in this life, a male in that life, or whatever. But we often, you might want to say, hang out through space and time with people that we know, we follow. I have talked about, for instance, and I draw on my own experience, and what I found is that when I died in my last life, I was in Germany. I was in a concentration camp, and I was being brutally kicked to death, basically. I was a female. And when I was looking at all this, I saw myself fly. I didn't spend a lot of time in between. I flew from that life to a person I knew who I had had lives with before, which was my father, tough man too, really interesting. I flew there, and because I knew my father in another lifetime, an old lifetime ago, and I knew that my mother was a kind woman. I was born late. My brother was born after me. We had two older sisters, and so that was kind of interesting. Is that the other lifetime elements? I went where there was safety because I had been brutalized. I was a female in Germany, but anyway, and there's a whole thing about that. German life was quite interesting, some parts, but that's not what I wanted you to point out. Is that we have connections. We have connections through space and time. Often can be long, long time, but we never forget them. It's part of our, you might say, tapestry. And I often found it very interesting when I was doing past life regressions with myself to find things out, that how I went from Germany to New Zealand, like flew. That was the image I had, was flying there. And then was, of course, in the conceptions, and then got eventually born into myself. And I was a complicated kid. I was very complicated. I remember my mother saying once, she's a funny little thing, you know. It's because I was emotional. And then most people don't always have tremendously emotional. Plus, I was born into a family through my father, again, that had psychic tendencies. So very picking up all sorts of things. So other lives, I highlighted in here, male, female, but also genetic and other lives. Where have you been with these people before? Sometimes you have brothers and sisters or cousins. It's like nothing, you know, it's just like, oh yeah, that's interesting, whatever. And then all of a sudden you can have another, I'm just thinking of my sister. My eldest sister had ended up having 12 children. The whole time I was growing up, my eldest nephew was 18 months younger than me. She was giving birth to children all the way to 13 months before my daughter was born. My whole life, she was having kids. My other sister had 5 children, and I was much closer to them. But anyway, it's like, but where did we connect with other lives? Who did we connect to? My elder sister and I, when I think about it, we were very similar in our personalities in some ways. Probably the depth part of us were very similar. We looked similar, actually, in retrospect. My other sister, who to me was my second mother, didn't look like me at all. And I related to that family much easier and over time. Well, there was space for me. I was kind of her oldest kid, you might want to say. Now, so other lives, where were we connected? Why do we relate to this relative better than this relative, or that relative, we should say, this and that? How come we relate different, don't feel like we belong to the family at all? Like, you know, we're the odd duck kind of thing. And that's the story of the swan, who was raised with some regular ducks and she was turned into being a swan. It's like sometimes we get like she was raised, this duck was raised, the ugly duckling it's called. But anyway, it's a story and it happens. So what about all these other lives that we've had that we do not remember, unless you're like me and you do past life regressions on yourself for a long time, over time. And you begin to see patterns of how you react and respond and what decisions you've made. Now, one of the things I don't have in here is the decisions that we make and how important they are, and how we keep remaking the same decision over and over and over again, sometimes for many lifetimes. Decisions about ourselves, decisions about society, decisions about this person or that person or whatever. And that's what all comes down into a general element of life. But there's 2 more things I want to talk about that I've got highlighted here. One of them is called program reinstillers. That's the name I gave to how we can be going along really well and something occurs, and then it's like we reach back in our memory banks to a decision we've made before. Now, we're not conscious of this, but this is what happens. And then we remake the same decision. I call it program reinstilling. Like all of a sudden, we're back believing, acting out, or doing all the things that we want to do based on all that has gone on before. And it's these decisions that we make that predict almost situations that'll happen in our lives, things that will go on, how we're going to respond. Or we sometimes can look at one person and we make a snap judgment on who, what, where they are at just by the vibration of that moment that they're in. But we've got to be careful of those program reinstillers, because what happens, you can do a lot of work changing your programming, lot of work. And then all of a sudden, something can happen and you just revert right back in and you input that old decision back in place. And all of a sudden, now we're having to deal with that. So that is a very important part. And also a lot has to do with that. It has a lot to do with habits. What is our habit of thinking? What is our habit of feeling? What is our habit of responding? All of those things. And even if it's not something that occurs in our life, when, like, let's say in a family matter, or you get a piece of news and all of a sudden it's like you feel like you're 10 and reacting like you're 10. Those are habits of response. Now, we can also create from that these program reinstillers that I find really, really important. And if you can begin to recognize when you are responding in an old pattern or an old way, what a difference it will make. It will create a whole different awareness of direction. We live this life. We don't live it, even if we want to be a hermit, we can't be a hermit. You got to go out of the house some point. I know I have met people who have been like, don't want anything to do with outside, but you still have to go out. You still have to go and interact. So sometimes you can be walking down the street and you see a person and their face will set you off because somebody, some other lifetime at some time had a face like that. Some people are super, super sensitive. And I was a sensitive child, no doubt about that. Unfortunately, that wasn't easy. At the same time, I wasn't really settled because, and basically to a large degree, I could say, and it's not putting blame on that, but the past lives that I had before I came into this one, I had done a lot of underground work, with the resistance and things like that. So I got beaten up really badly. No, they killed me by kicking me. But anyway, and I had a back issue for the majority of my life, and that's from there. But it's not like we can have life A, then we come into life B, and it looks like we start new, but we don't. Our souls are so much bigger, with so many decisions that have been made, so many belief systems that we bring with us that get triggered as we move on in our lives. Doesn't mean you come in as you, but all of a sudden something happens and it triggers memories, it triggers belief systems, and you make a decision about yourself, about life, about somebody else. And all of a sudden, you now have a whole way of looking at your life. And it may not be productive. It may not get you where you want to go. And so what then happens, once you created what we call a program, it keeps happening. We keep recreating, reinstilling. I call it that, the program reinstillers. We keep reinstilling that, so that your belief systems become entrenched. You begin to believe. Now, the thing is, and this is where a lot of people get confused, You may not be consciously aware of it until it is brought to the consciousness. How could a person who's coming in to check out why and how she has always, like she ideologically, I'm sorry, my tongue gets tongue twisted some there. Ideologically, she could see through why this relationship with her sibling. But all of a sudden, she's getting older and she's saying, why is this affecting me like this? So we go take a look. Yes, there was a genetic propensity within the family for this to happen. So she had that genetics born. Yes, the way it was treated. Yes, there'd been other lives. But at the same point, she's responsible for her reactions. And that's where the program reinstillers come in, and to be aware of the habits. We're not isolated through space and time. We could have a life multiple years ago where decisions were made. And you may have lots of other lives where that impact that brings that decision forward doesn't come out at all. And then you get put in a situation, because it is a part of who you are, where it brings out that. That's one of the reasons I am really, really like to see people do past life regressions, to be able to straighten things out, to see decisions made, to release the energy. But then, well, not everyone does a past life regression same way as I do, because I know I want to get to what was the decision made. Because the decision you make is what puts your programming in place that acts out into this life. And that's why if there's any part where you have a situation and you go, why do I handle it that way? The odds are it comes from another time and place. And you're acting out in this life as to how it works and where you're going. You are much more than you can think you are. And even me, like here I am, and all of a sudden having this tooth, and I'm a mess. And I realized, and actually did say to one of the assistants in the dentistry chair by my side, she was, the assistant that hands all the instruments to the dentist. I said, I don't know why I'm feeling like I'm 6 years old. But to me, that was a key. So when I went home, sore mouth and all, I said, okay, what the heck went on at 6? And that's when the vision came to me of being in a hospital room, broken arm, both bones, all by myself. Then I remembered when I was having radiation, they left me in the room with an instruction to stay perfectly still. I didn't know then I had reverted back to 6, but I didn't, and they left me there for a long time by myself, with my body beginning to hurt. And I broke down. My body broke down, started crying. It wasn't me. It did it. It was amazing. I was surprised. But 25 minutes left there hurting. And I went, that's when I put the two together. That was the 6-year-old coming out, frightened, because she didn't know what was going on, and hurting. There had to be pain involved, because I've often been by myself, but it was painful to the physical body. So when the dentist stuff happened, so it's like when you begin to put things together and you know how to clear energy, I won't go through that again in that way. It's because I knew where it came from, so I could transform it, which I know how to do. So we are in a genetic being. We have a genetic propensity. We have had other lives where we've made decisions about things that impact this life. We have a tendency to reach back in our memory banks, whether we're aware of it or not, and remake the same decisions over and over and over again. That can be mega lifetimes, or it can be just in this lifetime. But we'll reach back somewhere to remake that decision. And what happens is develop habits. We have habits of behavior, we have habits of reaction, we have habits of thinking. And some of those are not productive for us. Some of them are not productive in our relationships. So all of these things, I think, is that I found it very interesting. I had two long-term clients come to me, similar situation, and to find out where they belong, where they go, where they happen. I want you to remember you're on your life path. You are here to create for your highest happiness, to be happy, to be joyful, to be loving, all those things. And on that note, we didn't freeze. I'll give thanks. You just have a great day. And will be back on Sunday with a Sunday thought, little one. Okay. Blessings. Have a great day. Just remember, you're much more than you think you are. You've had many lifetimes. If you're even listening to me, you've had many lifetimes somewhere else, because there's a thirst for knowing and being aware. And anyway, have fun. Life's good. You enjoy. Bye now. Oh, and Karen, I wanted to say thank you.